The massive research vessel Starseeker drifted silently through the darkness of space, its smooth silver hull reflecting the distant starlight. Inside the ship's main observation deck, Dr. Blue's skin rippled with patterns of gentle light, a sign of excitement among his species. He pressed his four-fingered hand against the transparent viewing panel, gazing at the small blue planet that hung in the distance. "Most fascinating," he said, his translator converting his natural bioluminescent pulses into standard galactic speech. "This is the first Class 7 civilization we found in this sector." His assistant, Dr. Green, floated nearby, her tentacles curling with interest as she studied the data screens. "Their technology level is quite primitive by Council standards," Dr. Green noted, her skin shifting to a darker shade. "They've barely reached their own moon. No faster than light travel, no gravity manipulation, not even basic shield technology." Dr. Blue's skin flickered with what his species considered laughter. "That's what makes them perfect for our research. Simple species are always the easiest to study." He gestured toward one of the floating screens, where images of various Earth creatures scrolled past. "Look at their planetary wildlife. Every species has obvious defensive adaptations: sharp teeth, claws, poison glands, armored shells. But these humans, they're practically defenseless." The screen showed images of humans going about their daily lives. Dr. Blue and his team had been secretly observing Earth's broadcasts and communications for several weeks now, gathering preliminary data before making any direct contact. "No natural weapons," Dr. Green agreed, her tentacles waving thoughtfully. "No significant physical defenses. Thin skin, no protective scales or exoskeleton. They even lack basic environmental adaptations. They've had to build artificial shelters just to survive their own planet's weather patterns." Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with professional satisfaction as he pulled up another screen, this one showing a small space station orbiting Earth. "That's why I've chosen this location for our first specimen collection. The humans on this station are isolated, easy to access, and perfect for our standard biological survey protocols." The research vessel's crew, all members of various advanced species from across the galaxy, continued their preparations. They were part of the Galactic Council's biology division, tasked with studying and cataloging new species. It was routine work. They'd done it thousands of times before on hundreds of worlds. "I selected our first subject," Dr. Blue announced, bringing up a profile on the main screen. "A maintenance worker they call Jack. He works in the outer sections of the station, often alone. Perfect for quiet extraction." "Have you reviewed the safety protocols?" Dr. Green asked, her role as safety officer requiring her to check all procedures. Even primitive species can sometimes be unpredictable. Dr. Blue's skin rippled with what his kind considered a dismissive gesture. "They're barely more advanced than their planet's primates. Our containment systems are designed to hold creatures 10 times their size and strength. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? They don't even have natural defenses." The team spent the next few hours finalizing their preparations. They calibrated their sensors, prepared their testing chambers, and ran through their standard first contact protocols. None of them felt particularly concerned. After all, they'd studied countless species far more obviously dangerous than humans. As the Earth's sun rose over the horizon, casting long shadows across the space station, Dr. Blue gave the order to begin. The Starseeker's advanced cloaking technology kept it hidden as it moved closer to the station. In the specimen collection bay, the transport beam powered up, its soft hum filling the chamber. "Begin extraction sequence," Dr. Blue ordered, his skin glowing with anticipation. "Let's see what we can learn from these humans." None of the aliens noticed how their atmospheric sensors were already beginning to register slight anomalies from just the trace amounts of human material they'd collected from the station's exterior. None of them realized that they were about to learn a very important lesson about making assumptions. And none of them had any idea that this routine scientific survey was about to go horribly, horribly wrong. Jack was having a perfectly normal day fixing solar panels on the space station's outer hull when the world around him suddenly sparkled with strange light. One moment he was securing a loose connection, and the next he found himself in a bright, oddly curved room that seemed to glow from all sides. What the? He spun around, his tools still clutched in his hand. The movement sent him floating upward in the low gravity. That's when he saw them. 3 creatures stood, or rather floated, behind what looked like a transparent wall. 2 of them glowed with shifting patterns of blue and green light, while the third had something like tentacles waving gently in the air. They were clearly not human. "Please remain calm," a smooth, artificial voice said from somewhere in the room. "You have been selected for standard biological survey protocols. No harm will come to you if you cooperate." Jack's heart rate spiked. He'd been trained for many emergency situations on the space station, but first contact with aliens hadn't been one of them. "Who are you? What do you want?" Behind the transparent barrier, Dr. Blue's skin pulsed with satisfaction as his instruments recorded the human's vital signs. Fascinating. Their stress response includes increased heart rate and adrenaline production, just like many primitive species. He turned to Dr. Green. "Begin the standard testing sequence." A small opening appeared in the wall of Jack's chamber. A robotic arm extended, holding what looked like a metal wand. "Please remain still for initial scanning," the artificial voice instructed. Jack did the opposite. He pushed off the wall, trying to dodge the device. In the low gravity, he bounced around the chamber like a pinball. "Let me go. I'm not your lab rat." "Most unusual," Dr. Blue noted, his skin flickering rapidly. "Most species become passive when placed in an unfamiliar environment." He adjusted some controls, increased the gravity to their planetary normal. That should calm them down. The sudden return of Earth normal gravity caught Jack off guard. He fell to the floor but quickly rolled to his feet, years of emergency training kicking in. His mind raced through his options. He still had his tool belt. Maybe he could. "Commencing physical examination," the artificial voice announced. More robotic arms emerged from the walls, these ones holding various scientific instruments. Dr. Green's tentacles curled with concern as she studied the readings. "Doctor, I'm detecting some unusual chemical signatures from the subject. Perhaps we should." "Just normal biological responses," Dr. Blue interrupted. "Look how soft their exterior is. No claws, no natural armor. Clearly, they're not built for defense." His skin pulsed with what his species considered a smile. "This will be the easiest examination we've done this cycle." In the chamber, Jack backed against the wall. The robotic arms moved closer, their instruments glowing and humming. Sweat beaded on his forehead as his heart pounded. Unknown to him, his body was already beginning its natural stress responses, flooding his system with hormones and chemicals that would soon prove far from harmless. "Beginning tissue sample collection," the artificial voice announced. That's when Jack decided he wasn't going to just stand there and be probed. He grabbed a wrench from his tool belt and swung it at the nearest robotic arm. The impact sent sparks flying and the arm recoiling. Behind the barrier, Dr. Green's color darkened with alarm. "Doctor, the subject is showing aggressive behavior. And these chemical readings are becoming more pronounced. Perhaps we should." "Nonsense," Dr. Blue flashed confidently. "A simple sedative will calm them down. Prepare the standard pacification protocol." As the aliens prepared their next move, none of them realized that Jack's increasing stress was causing his body to produce more and more of the compounds that would soon prove catastrophic to their environment systems, and none of them understood that they were about to learn exactly why touching the human was a very, very bad idea. Dr. Blue had studied hundreds of species across the galaxy, but he had never seen readings quite like these. The instruments monitoring the human's chamber were showing chemical signatures that made no sense. Still, he was confident in his expertise. "I'll demonstrate the proper handling technique," he announced to his team. His skin pulsed with bright, confident patterns as he entered the small airlock that would give him access to the human's chamber. "Doctor, the atmospheric readings are becoming unstable," Dr. Green warned. her tentacles twisting with worry. The human stress response is producing unknown compounds. All species produce stress hormones. Dr. Blue flashed dismissively. Our containment systems can handle any natural biological products. The airlock cycled, and Dr. Blue floated into the chamber. Jack had wedged himself into a corner, still gripping his wrench, his skin shiny with sweat. The alien researcher reached out with his four-fingered hand, aiming to demonstrate the standard calming touch that worked on most species. That's when everything went wrong. The moment Dr. Blue's hand touched Jack's arm, his skin erupted in patterns of pain and shock. He jerked back, his natural bioluminescence flickering wildly. "Impossible," he gasped, his translator struggling to keep up with his rapid light pulses. "Doctor," Dr. Green's voice came through the chamber speakers. "Your readings are critical. Your outer membrane is showing signs of chemical burns." Dr. Blue stared at his hand in horror. Where he had touched the human skin, his own was turning a sickly dark color. The pain was incredible. In all his years of research, he had never encountered a species whose mere touch could cause such damage. Emergency decontamination. He managed to signal through his pain-racked light pulses. The chamber filled with a fine mist, meant to neutralize any dangerous substances. But the decontamination spray only made things worse. It mixed with Jack's sweat and the other chemicals his body was naturally producing, creating an even more potent compound. Warning alerts began blaring throughout the ship. "The atmospheric filters are failing," Dr. Green reported, her color turning almost black with fear. "The human's biochemistry is corroding the purification systems." In the chamber, Jack watched in confusion as the alien researcher writhed in apparent agony. He hadn't done anything except stand there, yet somehow he had hurt the creature just by being touched. "What's happening?" Jack demanded. "What did you do to me?" "What did we do?" Dr. Blue's translator crackled. "Your body, your chemistry, it's like nothing we've ever seen. You're producing compounds that are highly toxic to most carbon-based life forms." The ship's computer began listing the chemicals it was detecting. Lactic acid, ammonia, various proteins, enzymes, and dozens of other compounds that, while perfectly normal for humans, were proving devastating to the aliens' more sensitive biology. Dr. Green's voice was urgent. "The human stress response is increasing production of these toxins. Our filters can't keep up. We need to." She was cut off as another alarm blared. The ship's environmental systems were starting to fail. The mere presence of one stressed human was overwhelming technology, designed to handle the biological products of 1,000 different alien species. "Impossible," Dr. Blue whispered, his skin barely glowing now. "All this time, we thought they were defenseless, but their entire biology is a weapon." Jack stood in the corner, still not fully understanding what was happening. All he knew was that these aliens had kidnapped him, and now they were panicking just because they had touched him. As the ship's systems continued to deteriorate, Dr. Blue made a final note in his research log, warning to all Galactic Council species, humans are not defenseless as first assumed. Their natural biochemistry is highly toxic to most known life forms. Physical contact with their skin can cause severe damage. Their bodily fluids are corrosive to standard environmental systems. Classification: extremely dangerous. Recommendation: do not take usage. And things were about to get much, much worse. The Starseeker's medical bay was chaos. Dr. Blue lay on an examination table, his skin barely glowing, while medical staff tried to treat his injuries. The spot where he had touched the human had spread, turning more of his skin dark and lifeless. "We need to sedate the human," one of the medical officers suggested. "If we can calm them down, maybe their chemical production will decrease." Dr. Green, now in charge with Dr. Blue incapacitated, felt her tentacles curl with worry. "Agreed. Prepare the strongest safe sedative we have." In the containment chamber, Jack watched as more robotic arms descended from the ceiling. His heart raced faster, pumping more adrenaline through his system. He didn't know that his increasing stress was making things worse, that his body was now producing even more toxic compounds. "Please remain still," the ship's artificial voice announced. "You will be sedated for your own safety." "Like hell I will," Jack muttered. He had seen enough sci-fi movies to know that being sedated by aliens was never a good thing. As a needle-like device approached him, he swung his wrench again, smashing it. In the control room, alarms blared louder. "Sedation attempt failed," a technician reported. "And the human's chemical output just increased by 40%. "Try the gas," Dr. Green ordered. "The standard paralytic mixture that works on everything." A fine mist began filling Jack's chamber. He held his breath and pulled his shirt over his nose, thanking his emergency training for teaching him how to handle unknown atmospheres. But something unexpected happened. Instead of paralyzing him, the gas reacted with the sweat on his skin, creating new compounds. "Impossible," one of the scientists exclaimed. "Their biology is converting the paralytic gas into acid." Dr. Green's tentacles whipped in alarm. "The human sweat is catalyzing the gas into corrosive compounds." The ship's ventilation system, already struggling with Jack's natural biochemistry, now had to deal with these new chemicals. Metal began to corrode. Filters started failing. Warning lights flashed across every control panel. "Nothing is working," a technician reported. "Every sedative we try either has no effect or reacts badly with their biology. And their stress response keeps getting stronger." Jack felt a surge of confidence. Whatever was happening, he seemed to be winning without even trying. He gripped his wrench tighter and faced the transparent barrier. "Let me go," he demanded, "or I'll start really trying to cause problems." The aliens didn't know that Jack was bluffing. They didn't understand that he had no idea his body chemistry was causing such havoc. All they knew was that this seemingly primitive creature had neutralized their sedatives, injured their lead researcher, and was somehow damaging their ship just by existing. "We have to do something," a junior researcher said. "At this rate, their chemical output will overwhelm our life support systems within hours." Dr. Green studied the readings with growing horror. The humans' natural stress responses were proving more dangerous than the defensive capabilities of many predatory species they had studied. And the worst part was, the human wasn't even trying to be dangerous. This was just their natural state when frightened. "New classification," she dictated to the ship's computer. "Humans are to be considered extreme biological hazards. Their bodies produce toxic compounds continuously, with production increasing under stress. Standard containment methods are ineffective. Standard sedatives are useless. Their biochemistry can transform harmless substances into dangerous compounds." As she finished her notes, another alarm joined the chorus of warnings. The containment field around Jack's chamber was starting to weaken. The corrosive compounds had reached its power systems. "Dr. Green," a technician called out, fear evident in their voice. "The human, they're not just damaging the ship anymore. They're breaking free." And Jack, still unaware of exactly how dangerous he was to these aliens, prepared himself for what he thought would be a difficult escape. He had no idea that his mere presence was doing more damage than any weapon could have done. The Starseeker's corridors echoed with alarms. Emergency lights flashed everywhere as the ship's systems continued to fail one by one. In the control room, Dr. Green and her team watched in horror as the containment field around Jack's chamber flickered and sparked. Power to containment systems dropping below 40%. A technician announced, their crystalline body vibrating with fear. The human's chemical emissions have corroded through 3 layers of shielding. On their screens, they could see Jack testing the barrier with his wrench. Each hit sent sparks flying, not because of the force, but because his sweat was eating through the metal of his tool and reacting with the energy field. "We have to evacuate this section," Dr. Green ordered, her tentacles coiling tightly. "Seal all emergency bulkheads. Release the..." She never finished her sentence. With a final burst of sparks, The containment field collapsed. Jack stumbled forward, surprised by his sudden freedom. The aliens watched in terror as their sensors showed the humans' toxic cloud beginning to spread through the chamber. Emergency protocols, someone screamed. Seal your environmental suits. But they weren't prepared for this. Their suits were designed to protect against radiation, vacuum, and normal biological hazards. They weren't made to handle the cocktail of acids, proteins, and other compounds that human bodies produce naturally. Jack looked around the control room, finally seeing his captors clearly. There were about a dozen aliens of different species. Some glowed, some had tentacles, others looked like walking crystals. All of them were backing away from him in obvious fear. "Stay back," Dr. Green warned, her translator making her voice shake. "You don't understand. Your body, it's dissolving our equipment. The acids in your sweat, the bacteria on your skin, the enzymes you produce, they're all lethal to us." Jack paused, finally understanding why they were so afraid. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone," he said, raising his hands. "I just want to go home." But the gesture made things worse. The movement sent droplets of his sweat flying through the air. Where they landed, metal sizzled and alien equipment sparked. One drop hit a crystal being's outer shell, causing it to crack and screech in pain. The humans spreading their chemicals. Someone yelled, "Run!" Panic broke out. Aliens fled in all directions, their fear making them clumsy. Jack tried to help one that had fallen, but they scrambled away from his touch in terror. "Don't," Dr. Green warned. "Your attempts to help will only make it worse. Your biochemistry becomes even more toxic when your heart rate increases." The ship's computer added to the chaos. "Warning: life support systems failing in sectors 7 through 12. Toxic contamination spreading through ventilation. Emergency protocols failing." Dr. Green watched in despair as her beautiful research vessel, designed to study the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy, was being destroyed by the natural biology of what they had thought was a harmless species. "Send the emergency signal," she ordered. "Warning to all ships: do not approach humans. Do not attempt capture. Their bodies are biological weapons. Their touch is toxic. Their fluids are corrosive. Standard containment fails. Standard protection fails. They are not hostile, but they are lethal." Jack stood in the middle of the control room, alone now as the aliens had fled to safer sections of the ship. He looked at his hands, amazed that his normal human body could cause so much fear and damage to such advanced beings. The ship lurched suddenly. More alarms blared. The computer's voice came again. "Critical system failure imminent. Evacuation protocols initiated." And as the Starseeker began to tear itself apart, Jack realized he had an even bigger problem. How was he going to get back to his space station if his mere presence was destroying the ship he was on? The answer came with another violent shake of the ship, and Jack knew this was about to get much worse. The Starseeker shuddered like a dying animal. Emergency lights cast red shadows through corridors filled with acidic mist, a toxic combination of human biochemistry and failing ship systems. Jack ran through the chaos, trying to find a way back to his space station. "Please," he shouted into the empty hallways, "I just need a way to communicate with my station. Or a rescue pod." His voice echoed back to him, accompanied only by the blare of alarms and the groaning of corroding metal. The aliens had sealed themselves away in protected sections of the ship, leaving him alone in the contaminated areas. In the ship's emergency command center, protected by the last working environmental shields, Dr. Green and her surviving crew watched the human through failing camera systems. "Look at their endurance," one technician noted with horror. "They've been running for 20 minutes in toxic atmosphere. Any other species would have collapsed by now." "That's because the atmosphere is toxic because of them," Dr. Green responded, her tentacles waving in agitation. "The air is mostly their own chemicals. They're immune to their own poisons." On their screens, they watched as Jack reached a sealed doorway. In a normal situation, The reinforced metal would have been impossible for any unaugmented being to move. But the door had been sitting in a cloud of human-produced acids for several minutes. "He's not going to," a crew member started to say. Jack grabbed the edge of the door, not knowing that his sweat had weakened the metal. With a screech of protest, the door shifted. Decades of space station maintenance work had made him stronger than the aliens had calculated, and now that strength was being applied to metal that had been chemically compromised by his own body. "Impossible," someone shouted. "They're breaking through a security door with their bare hands." The door finally gave way with a shriek of tearing metal. Jack stumbled through, leaving acidic handprints on the walls where he steadied himself. "Engineering level breached," the ship's computer announced. "Warning. Critical systems exposed to human biochemical contamination." Dr. Green's color darkened with fear. The human was getting closer to the ship's core systems. "We have to stop them. Can we vet that section to space?" "Negative," a technician replied. "The airlock controls. They're corroded. Nothing's responding." They watched as Jack made his way through. 3 days after the Starseeker incident, the Galactic Council held an emergency session. Representatives from 50 alien species gathered to hear Dr. Green's report about the human situation. Her tentacles moved slowly with exhaustion as she faced the council. "Honorable council members," she began, her translator converting her bioluminescent pulses into standard speech. "I come before you with urgent news about the species known as humans. Everything we thought we knew about them was wrong." The chamber's screens displayed images from the Starseeker's recordings. They showed Jack, just one average human, unknowingly destroying an advanced starship simply by being there. "As you can see," Dr. Green continued, "the human escaped our containment not through violence or technology, but through their natural biology. Their sweat dissolved our metals. Their breath corrupted our air. Their touch burned our people. Even our most advanced protection systems failed." One council member, a crystalline being, raised a glowing appendage. "But how did the incident end? How did you survive?" Dr. Green's color darkened at the memory. "The human proved more resourceful than we expected. After we separated the engineering section, they found the section's emergency beacon. Instead of panicking, they activated it, and it was answered by their space station." The council chamber filled with murmurs of surprise. Dr. Green continued, "Their primitive rescue ships approached our vessel. We had no choice but to release the human to them or risk their rescuers boarding us. The separated engineering section was completely contaminated. We had to destroy it to prevent their biochemicals from spreading further." She activated another display, showing the final damage report. "Half of our ship destroyed. 37 crew members injured by chemical exposure. 3 months of research data lost. All because we underestimated one human's natural defenses." The head of the council spoke next. "What are your recommendations, Doctor?" "First, we must reclassify humans immediately," Dr. Green replied. "They are not the primitive, defenseless species we assumed. Their entire biology is a weapon. Their bodies constantly produce compounds that are lethal to most known life forms. More importantly, they are immune to most of our defensive measures because they evolved in an environment we would consider toxic." She displayed her final analysis. "Even minimal contact with humans can be fatal. Their sweat contains acids that eat through our strongest materials. Their breath carries bacteria that can devastate our ecosystems. Their blood is toxic enough to kill most species on contact. And the most dangerous part, they don't even know they're deadly. It's just their natural state." Back on the human space station, Jack finished giving his report to station security. They had a hard time believing his story about being kidnapped by aliens, but the strange burns on the station's hull, where the rescue ships had docked, matched his account. Meanwhile, in the council chamber, Dr. Green made her final recommendations. "We must establish new protocols for human contact. No physical interaction under any circumstances. No specimen collection. No direct study. They must be classified as an extreme biological hazard." She paused, her tentacles curling in emphasis. But most importantly, we must never forget this lesson. What we thought was their greatest weakness, their lack of obvious defenses, was actually their greatest strength. They don't need claws or armor or poison glands. Their entire existence is toxic to the rest of the galaxy. The Council voted unanimously to accept her recommendations. Within hours, warning beacons were deployed throughout human space, broadcasting a simple message in all known languages. Warning. Human QARNTIN zone. Do not APPROH. Do not ATMPTCONTAT. Extreme biological hazard. Lethal contamination risk. Emergency protocol for all species. Do not TOUCH TA humans. And so, humanity gained an unexpected protection in the galaxy, not through their technology or their weapons, but through the simple fact that their bodies were naturally more dangerous than any artificial weapon the Council had ever encountered. Sometimes, the best defense is just being human.